There's a saying that we become what we behold. We become what we look at. Because what we look at determines what we think about. And what we think about determines how we feel. And how we feel determines how we act. And how we act shapes who we become. We become what we behold. So the question we can ask ourselves is, what I am beholding and what I'm looking at making me the person that I want to become? Is it making me a more joyful, hopeful, and loving person? Or is it making me more anxious, depressed, and sorrowful? You know, people often ask me why I'm not on social media like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. My first thought is, well, I just don't have any friends, and so I guess I couldn't do anything with it now. But it's really because I always say I don't like who I become when I'm looking at it. For some reason, whenever I'm on it, afterwards I always just feel an emptiness and an anxiety. It doesn't bring me peace. And it's the same thing with the news. I've had to really check myself in these recent months because I've been so caught up in the news of everything that's happening in the Catholic Church and everything that's happening in the politics in our country. And I noticed that when I walk away from it, I always feel more depressed, a little more anxious and frustrated. It doesn't bring me peace. So obviously that doesn't mean, you bury your head in the sand and you have to know what's going on, but you don't need to fill your mind with it continually. Because whatever you fill your mind with continually will shape everything you do. And that's why, again, forgiveness is so important. Because when you hold a grudge, you're beholding that all the time. So whatever pain was caused you, you see it in front of you all the time. And you become filled with resentment and bitterness. So you become a bitter and angry person. Right? So we become what we behold. The question we ask ourselves is what I am beholding making me the person I want to become? And I think that's why today's psalm is just so important, because it teaches us the one thing we should continually behold. He says, I set the Lord ever before me. With him at my right hand I shall not be disturbed. Therefore my heart is glad, and my soul rejoices, because God will not allow his faithful one to undergo corruption. In a sense, this is the secret to joy, the secret to peace. Because he always puts the Lord ever before him, because he's always beholding God, he's free to surrender. He doesn't get caught up in everything that's happening around him all the time. And he says, you will not allow your faithful one to undergo corruption. That word corruption is very important. It comes from the Latin corrumpere, means to altogether break down. We live in a world that is always breaking down. Everything around us is subject to corruption. Right? Relationships, money, security, jobs, the church, governments. It's all subject to corruption. But what happens is that the more we behold those things, the more we fill our minds with the things that are breaking down around us, our hearts begin to corrode with it. Our hearts begin to break down too. It's because we put all of our mind on those passing things, and we find no place of rest. And our hearts corrode. That's why a philosopher once said, beware that when fighting monsters, you yourselves do not become monsters. For when you gaze long into the abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. You become what you behold. That's why it's so important to continually behold God, to put God in front of us in prayer and in meditation, in coming to Mass, because it sets our hearts on the one constant in life, the one thing that will never let us down. And when we're settled on that, we're free. We're free from all the ups and the downs and the corruptions that happen around us. This past week I was visiting Boise for the young adult conference, and I had an experience that really hit me very hard. A young man came up to me. He's about 20 years old. I've known him for about 3 years, on and off. I just see him occasionally. Just a couple years ago, he came up to me and let me know that his father had just recently died of a heart attack. This was his first year in college. Totally unexpected. And just within, months of that, things got so hard at home that he had to drop out of school so that he could go back home to support his family. So it was very tough, run of luck. But then he came up to me just this past weekend when I was in Boise. And he came up to me actually with a smile on his face, and I asked him how he was doing. And he said, well, I just received some news I thought I'd tell you about. Because I was just diagnosed with terminal colon cancer. Next month I have to undergo surgery, and the doctor said that my body's so weak they really don't think I'll come out of it alive. And it's like, what do you say to something like that? And I dropped my head, and he was so amazing to me as he immediately stopped me and he said, it's okay. And he smiled. And he said, God is with me. I'm okay. He goes, but pray for my loved ones because they don't see it the same way I do. I realized afterwards, upon thinking about him, he's okay because he's looking at God. Because he's totally conformed himself with this psalm. I have set the Lord ever before me. Therefore, my heart is glad. My soul rejoices. My body too abides in confidence. Because he will not allow his faithful one to undergo corruption. So even when everything around this young man's life is breaking down, his heart never broke down with it. Because his eyes were always on God. He never lost his peace. He never lost his smile because he set the Lord ever before him. And that's what we do every time we come to Mass, every week. In one moment, I will set the Lord before every single one of you. And you will behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. Jesus said in the Gospel, heaven and earth will pass away, but my word will not pass away. Everything is passing away around us, but the Word made flesh, Jesus Christ in the Holy Eucharist, he never passes away. He's constant. And he's always coming to us. And when we behold him there, when we truly learn to look at God, then we are set free. Because he holds up our hearts when everything else corrodes around us. He's our anchor, and he keeps us afloat. So that every time we come to Mass, we can look upon him in the Eucharist and cry out with the psalmist, you are my inheritance, O Lord. My heart is glad, and my soul rejoices, because you will show me the path of life, the fullness of joy in your presence forever. Behold that, and I promise you, it will make you the person you want to become.